In today's episode of Budget YouTuber, we're going to go over how you can level up your content with simple background animations that are free and easy to use, like this one. So linked in the description down below is a link to this page where I have 58 resources for free animations. We're going to go over each of them, but first I want to go over my 3 free ones. First of all, if we click on the GitHub link, you can see in here all of the code you're going to need. If you just download this, inside of this demo folder, you can literally click on these tools and they will just run inside of your browser perfectly the way that I've been running these in here. So if you download it and you click on this, you'll immediately see this DVD logo. So this is the first one that just shows how to do it. I have this little explanation file, but you can close him. It's basically just showing that there are some hotkeys. You can do the spacebar, or you can do 1 through 9 to adjust the speed. So if we hit 9, it'll be the fastest speed. And if we hit spacebar, he'll stop changing color. And then if we hit spacebar again, he'll change color again. And if we hit, like 1, he'll slow down, or 5, he'll be a medium. So you can do this yourself with just one image. You don't have to change any code that I have. This is the code that you would get by downloading it. This is the DVD.html demo. You wouldn't have to change a single thing other than this one line of code. So you would just need to point it to your own image file. So you could even go into there and you could just replace dvd.png with whatever file you want. And now suddenly you could have your logo bouncing around the screen. Now, if you want to do your own implementation with custom HTML, that's just fine, but you do need some HTML skill. So if you don't have any HTML skill, go back to episode 2 because I do explain a lot about the basics of HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. This is for a more intermediate group, and so I'm not going to cover those in as much detail, but all you need to know is that these 3 lines right here is how you include my library. And then you have to call BounceImg.js. You don't necessarily have to give it parameters. We'll cover that later. It expects there to be something with the ID BounceImages, or for you to pass in something here for what you want the ID to be called. And then inside of that container, there just has to be 1 or more images, and then it'll handle the rest. If you don't size them like this guy, that's fine. It'll just take their default size of the image. But if you want to change their size, then you have to size it explicitly. So that was the DVD Screensaver. Let's see how we can use that exact same library to completely change things. So let's use Cynic logos. So that one you saw at the very beginning was using the exact same code, but just with these 3 image links. And then if you hit space, they'll stop coloring, or if you hit 9, they'll go faster. If you hit space, again, everything will start coloring just like they were before, right? So let's go into the code for that one just to see how similar it is. So that's avatar.html. And inside of here, again, it looks identical to the other one. It's got the 3 lines of code linked to include the library and just some header information that's not important. It invokes the BounceImg.js with no parameters. It has the same ID div with images inside of it, but this time it's 3 different images. Now these ones I didn't style because they didn't need to be changed. I thought that the size was fine, but the avatar was a little bit big, and so I just wanted to scale him down to only be 50% of the view height. So that is how I created this one. Very simple, almost identical to the DVD code. Now let's see one that's a little bit different, but code-wise it's going to look almost the same. So if we click on free tools, now you see a whole bunch of icons bouncing around the screen. Now these are the free tools that I covered in the very first overview episode of Budget YouTuber. But you'll notice that, there's some opacity going on. They're a little bit different. And so you can see there's a background, right? And let's see what the difference of the code will be, because you'll be surprised how similar the code is to the first 2 examples I gave you. This one is freetools.html. Now there is one difference here. Instead of just including the 3 lines of code that I did normally, I've inserted an extra CSS file. Now this isn't super important, but this is just to show that you still can style your file in a different way than the way that I've done by default. So in here, if we look at the CSS file, you'll see that all I did was I added a background image gradient of some reds. That's the red background that I set back here. And then all I did was set the image opacity to be only 93% opaque, so it's 7% transparent. And then I just set their height to be dependent on the view width of the screen. That's it. So you can see that just with a little bit of styling, I've changed the size of these icons, and I've changed their opacity, and I've changed the background. So that's the only CSS that got added there. Other than that, the HTML is incredibly similar, right? So we still have the 3 lines of code that were included for the library, this one and these 2. And again, this is downloadable in my GitHub link. This free tools HTML just exists inside of there with the icons, with everything you need for it to work. You can see that I called BounceImg.js with no parameters because I didn't need to change anything by default. I still kept the same ID here, but I could have changed that, right? So I could have said that this is, some div, and up here, then I would just need to pass in some div, like this. And then that would work exactly the same. It would just say, hey, use this ID rather than the BounceImg ID by default. But I hadn't even changed that. I had left it to be the default BounceImages like that. And then the only difference is just that I added a whole bunch of images, right? So I added all of my tools, 1 through 16, and then I just added them again, but in reverse order, so that there would be a different set of overlapping ones, right? So that number 1 would be on top of things sometimes, and number 6 would be under things. Because by default, these get put into the HTML back to front. So this is the backmost image, and this guy way down here is the frontmost image. But other than that, there's no changes to the HTML. I just linked a whole bunch of images in there, and this guy right here did the rest. He magically detected all the images and animated them into this marvelous little thing right here. So if you have a simple animation like this you want to do, you can do that. But there is so much more you can do with free tools. So those are just some simple ones I created. In the future, I'll add some more, so this list won't remain at 58, but for right now, it's only 58 different animations. But I'll add some more to my section as I create some fun ones in the future that you can screen grab and use in the backgrounds of your videos. So now let's dive into FreeFrontend. Now you'll notice that I have this actually split into JavaScript animations, and then if you scroll down here, CSS animations. Now the reason I did that is that CSS animations can be a little bit harder to modify yourself to be different. They tend to try to make everything live inside of the CSS, and so you can't just tweak a little bit of HTML to change the text and things like that. So it's a little bit harder to edit. So these CSS animation ones are for people that are a little bit more familiar with HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. Whereas these JavaScript ones, usually you can tweak things pretty easily because they've tried to make it like a framework that you can use. But sometimes they're just, what they are, and that's all you get. So this one is a little matrix animation. It'll take a second to load here, but this guy right here, you could have as the background of your video. And if you want, you can even change it, right? So you're like, oh, I want a red matrix. There you go. So here on the fly, you can change things, and up here you can test out different changes. You can download the code and you can run this on your local machine, or you can just run it inside of here and then screen zoom or something. I'm going to go through these kind of fast because there's so many. So these are just examples of the different animations that you can find for free online. And you could get these and you could put them in the background of your video. And now again, your video just has leveled up content. It just looks a little bit cooler. That was Ether. Here's Ashfall, another pretty cool one. Here's Bubbly. This one is just for backgrounds. It's not animated. Here's a circuitry one. It's kind of fun. It's got this void in the middle with circuits going everywhere. Here's another circuitry one. Again, just cool background animation you could do. You could change the tint. You could change the opacity inside of something like DaVinci Resolve. And so you could tweak that to your liking without even needing to know anything about HTML. This one I called Clicksplosion. It's not what they called it. They just called it color changing. But as you click around the screen, you'll see these little explosions where you are, and it'll change into something else. So if you changed your screen grabber tool to avoid your cursor, you could then have these animations kind of just exploding all over the screen, and that could be a fun effect for the background of your video. Here's cosine and sine. These just create some interesting waves that go throughout it, and if you click on it, it just mixes things up, which is fun. Here's Cosmos pattern. A lot of these tools you should click on because sometimes you'll find some interesting things. Sometimes they make it very obvious with a slider like this, but that can also make it a little bit harder to hide this. So to be able to hide this and just get the background animation, you'd have to know a little bit about CSS or HTML to go through and maybe make this, transparent so that you just saw the background. Here's Crystal Parallax, and again, if you click on it, it makes some interesting color changes. Again, this would just make for an excellent background of a video, right? You could be green screened and talking in front of this. It would look really awesome. Here's Fireflies, another fun animation just set on top of this forest. Here's Floral Pulse. Now these ones aren't exactly flowers, but they pulse in and out like this. Again, could make for a fun background for a video. Here's Flow Field, another fun one that if you click on it, it changes colors, it changes directions. So every time I click, a new different thing happens, which again, if you're not capturing your cursor, could lead to some cool effects. Here's Metaballs. This one is kind of a liquidy substance that merges and unmerges throughout, which is a lot of fun. Here's Random Chevrons. So this one just generates a whole bunch of these backgrounds that are interesting. And if you click on it, it changes color, changes size of the chevrons and the shading of the chevrons. Here's Random Circles. Like the Random Chevrons, you can change the colors over and over again. Here's Random Squares, another similar one, but with squares. Here's Rubber Bands. This one's an interactive one. Again, you would have to animate this one almost like a puppet, right? So let's say you had some text going across the screen in your video and you wanted this to be in the background. Well, you could just screen grab you doing this without the cursor, and now suddenly you have a cool animation around that text. Here's Shimmer, another just fun background for your videos. snowing if you're in the mood for holiday snow. And again, you can kind of change the size and the counts so you can, make it have a lot more snow or less snow. Here's Tetris. This is kind of a fun one. It'll keep going down, and as it gets to the very top, it'll destroy pieces of it. So like this one, when it gets all the way to the top, it'll phase out and it'll start over, which is fun. Here's Trebuchet Lattice. Now again, at first, it just looks like kind of a random maze pattern, but if you move your mouse over it, you'll notice that it's kind of changing the rotation of things and making a new pattern. So again, if you're not capturing your mouse in OBS and you just captured the screen, you could do something where you zoom this back and forth, and now suddenly there's this intriguing trickle effect in the background. Here's Weak in Motion. Again, this is just kind of a sand dune vibe, and it'll slowly rotate around to change which direction the waves are coming from. Here's Wobble. This one, again, is an interactive one. So that's all from the JavaScript free front end. Now we're going to look at VantaJS. Now VantaJS, they're more about trying to make very intriguing looking ones. They're not quite as customizable, but they're customizable with sliders. So while you can't change, a ton of things, the things you can change have drastic effect. Let's click on birds to start. So as you put your mouse through, you'll notice the birds kind of avoid your mouse, right? They scatter. And you can change the color of things, right? You can change things to be more blue. You can change the birds to be, let's make them really yellow, right? So you can change all these sliders, and then when you're done, you can hide this and you can screen grab pretty easily. Or you can download the code, and you just have to include their VantaBird min, right? So they'll tell you exactly the code you have to copy with the customizations you put in place, and then when you run this in an HTML browser, it'll run perfectly. So you do have to have a little bit of HTML skill, but they're putting it right here. You just have to paste that into your HTML. Now you can browse their ones here below. So that was birds. They've also got fog. I've included links to each of these inside of mine as well. Waves, right? You can change, how zoomed in you are. You can change the wave speed, the wave height, the shininess, right? And you can change the color again. So it can make for some really cool background animations for your videos. And as you move the mouse, it changes the perspective that you're looking at things from. Here's clouds. Again, a simple one, but as you move your mouse, you're kind of looking over the clouds 3 different directions. Here's clouds 2. This one I don't believe is interactive, but it again could make for a cool background depending on what video you're doing. Doesn't maybe have as many customizations, but if you change, a few things, you can make it brighter or darker, right? So you could make, a sunsetty cloud, right? Something like that. Now we've got globe. This is kind of a fun one. Again, you can change the colors on this, but it's just kind of a cool vector art style one. Then you've got net, again, another cool one. Cells. This is like plant cells, but again, if you change the color of it, now suddenly it doesn't feel like plant cells as much. It feels like, I don't know, now it's, more like living tissue, right? So you can change that to your liking. Trunk, I didn't include this one in mine just because I thought it was a little boring. Topology is another fun one, but you can change the colors on it to be, if you wanted it to be light on dark or dark on light, you could totally change the look of it, right? Here's dots, another fun one, very vector art kind of style. Rings, another one. Again, you can change the colors of the rings. You can make the background a lot darker, right? Say you want a super dark background like that. Well, you can do it. And halo is another fun one. Now again, it's not that I'm recommending this for everything you do, but this could just be a fun way to mix up the backgrounds on your videos and not have them always look and feel exactly the same. So that's it for all of my JavaScript ones. Now onto the CSS ones. Now again, the CSS ones are slightly different, but it's the same basic concept. You can run these offline as well. Again, they might be a little bit harder to customize, but you could always record that and then zoom that in the background. So that was Berlin. Here's a blockchain animation one that could be fun for a video. Here's bouncing. There's various types of bouncing like that. And I guess I can expand this, right? Or a countdown card. Just some fun animations that you can copy and do. And that one's kind of trying to teach you how to do it in CSS, which makes it easier to reuse. The bubbles one I found takes a while to load, but it is a fun looking one. Here's a cloudy hex. Just kind of zooms in on that hex, or helix, not hex, sorry. Here's circles and lines. I missed this one, but again, just kind of a fun animated background you could use. Here's color wipes. This one is a lot of fun too. So if you expand that, this could make for some really fun transitions, right? Even if you just kind of clipped the middle part. You have to run it again, so let me refresh it. But it runs really cool, and you could clip any few second period of that to be a cool wipe transition in your video. Desk, this is just a simple animation, but it's a vector art, so it should scale well. And here's one they called I thought this was kind of fun. Again, if you're doing something sci-fi-y, that's a cool animation to put in the background. And again, in DaVinci Resolve, you could color tint it so that it didn't have to be white. Here's a film grain one, and you could change the image that's in the background, right? You can change it to sepia tone, you can invert the grain so that's way more grainy, right? And if you reload it, I think it actually chooses an image at random. Yeah, so here's a film grain on a forest. Here's Kaleidoscope, another fun animation. Vector art should scale really well. Here's Moon. This one, I'm almost more tempted to try to delete this and just get the background. Here's a couple night and day ones. Again, these ones are trying to explain to you how to do it, but when you hover over the thing, it changes to night, and when you exit, it changes to day. And so they're trying to teach you how to do it so that you could use this inside of your own page and make it full screen, but you have to learn the lessons that they're trying to teach you here. Here's Night and Day Cat, a very similar one, but you can just change the slider to day, sunset, or night, and it animates each one of them. Here's Rainbow Text. This one, you can change the text, but I will tell you that it is limited. So for example, you can have it say whatever you want, but it's kind of limited to this number of things, right? So if I wanted to say cynic, well, that's too few, but I could maybe say placebo, and then we just hit run. It'll actually run again, but this time with our text in place. Oh, look, it says placebo instead of welcome. All right, here's a simple snow globe, again, kind of like the desk, just a fun animation, maybe for Christmas time. Here's Squareception. Again, this could make for a great background animation if you zoomed in on it. Here's Text Scroll. This one actually takes an entire HTML page, so whatever HTML you've made, it just scrolls through that entire HTML as is. So the CSS captures it and animates it just like that, which is really cool. So if you wanted to do like a Star Wars intro, right, you could make a HTML page that was just yellow text, and it would animate that up and across. And then lastly, we've got waves, just some simple CSS waves. So hopefully this has been useful to you. Again, this is linked in the description down below, but this is 58 different animations that you can use right now for free in the backgrounds of your videos with minimal HTML, CSS, and JavaScript knowledge. But again, if you need a little bit more HTML, CSS, or JavaScript knowledge, go back to episode 2 because I go over it in detail. Thank you so much for joining me. I've been Cynic Placebo, and go level up your content with some budget YouTuber tips. Cheers.